Hi, I'm Debbie Moraes, and once again, welcome to Legal Matters. This is the program that's been designed to address the critical and sometimes contentious matters that are addressing businesses and consumers today. As we say, it's legal information, practical solutions, and straight talk about a wide variety of topics that affect your home and your work life. In our last segment, we discussed ridiculous regulations and laws and how they sometimes impact on your basic civil rights. At the same time, they sometimes even make you a criminal. Today we're going to discuss debt, another big problem. Also, you may really need to think more than twice about some of the debt collection companies that are positioning themselves to help you. Are they really? So once again with us we have from Debt Bazar, Grasso law firm in East Providence, Jackie Grasso and David Bazar.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
I'm glad that you're here. So if consumers thought that they had a problem with their inability to pay off their debt, could you ever imagine as a consumer that your real problem wasn't the debt itself, but rather that you might end up being a victim yourself, that you might end up paying more, and actually, depending on who you work with, you might actually become a victim and a criminal, called a criminal yourself, depending on who you worked with. We'll talk about that a little bit later, as some of the attorneys general in various states are causing more troubles than they're actually fixing. So, if someone owes a debt and they didn't try to fix it themselves and they didn't call you, but they're contacted by companies, we can help you. How does this scam unfold? What happens?
Well, the old adage is true. If it's too good to be true, it isn't true at all. So if somebody's calling you to help you with a debt and they're asking for a fee for service, then that's a scam.
Yeah, I would always be aware of the pay us up front service fee before they've actually told you what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. There are some aspects to this debt reorganization, so to speak, where they will negotiate and you make a one payment a month lump sum type of thing that are real. But you have to be very careful about which ones are and which ones aren't.
What you first want to determine is it a profit agency or is it a non-profit agency? So for instance, Consumer Credit Counseling, which is a non-profit agency, it's been around forever, that's the first place you should start, because they are not there to make money off you. They're there to help you pay your debts and reorganize.
Well, what's been written about lately in the newspapers and also articles put forth by the Better Business Bureau is buyer beware. There are a lot of local businesses who are, as you say, allegedly conducting these advance loan fee schedules. Now, they're in the business, as you say, to make a profit, so they're going to be doing some marketing. They're going to be doing some outreach. How do they know how to reach you as a consumer if you have debt? How does that happen?
Well, the only thing I can determine is that they're doing an inquiry into your credit. How they're doing that, I don't know.
Are there lists? I had read that
they sell lists. You know the privacy notice you get on your credit card every so often, or anytime you take a loan, you get a privacy notice in the mail. Well, if you don't respond to that, my understanding is they can then sell your name to mailing lists or to other credit card agencies, share information. So if you look on your credit report, you'll see a lot of inquiries. And you might say, well, how did they get my Social Security number that they can inquire into my credit? That's what ultimately happens, is your own creditors are selling your information to marketing agencies so that they could pitch you. That's why you would also get a solicitation from a credit card company as well.
Pre-approved credit cards and things of that nature. Yeah. They buy the information from various sources, and then you're on that list, you're getting these types of inquiries and mailings.
So is it mostly that these scams are emanating from the credit card debtor?
It could be. It could very well be, because how else would they know that you're having? Well, for instance, let me back up. With foreclosures, once, back up. In some states, to foreclose on a property, you have to go through the courts. It's called a judicial notice state. In Rhode Island, you don't have to go through the courts to start a foreclosure. So assuming they go through the courts, it's a matter of public record. So these companies go down to the courts and they get this information the same way they would as if someone's suing you or me for a debt that they didn't pay. It's a matter of public record. These companies do go out and they get that information, and that's how they start soliciting people.
And in Rhode Island, the foreclosures, they're listed in the legal notices.
Yeah.
So oftentimes have people who just read through those things. And a lot of the credit card companies have people who read through the probate notices, so that if somebody dies who owes them money, they now know that there's an estate being opened. They can send their notice to the estate that there's a debt owed to them.
Is it true that if ever any company calls you, without you soliciting them, without you initiating the call, if any company calls you to say, hi, I can fix your debt, should you flatly say, thanks, but no thanks?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You want to know why they're calling you, where did they come from, and if they're asking for money up front. Well, look, if they're even asking for your social security number or some personal information, never. You never want to disclose that.
Just like
Say
any
no.
other thing you're going to do, you want to check around with people who may have been in the same situation, find out who they used, and you contact them. You don't want the people contacting you to be the ones that really take you for a ride.
But then that goes a step further, because what people are doing, consumers are doing today, is they're going out to the internet and then they're just Googling, debt negotiation, debt settlement, and you're getting hits from all these different companies. And that is not the best way of finding a solution to your credit problems.
Right, because it's my understanding when you do that, information now is shared with other people that, oh, this is what they're looking for, you might want to contact these
Prey
folks.
on them also, as they say.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
Apart from credit card debt, which is usually high in terms of its percentage, what about people who have fallen behind because of medical bills, and then somebody starts calling, we can help you and we can resolve or ameliorate that rate of payment? Are those companies who are trying to help with even medical debt, are they also phony baloney?
They all fall into the same category.
And it's my understanding some of these companies, what they'll do is they'll actually go out and buy your debt.
That's what they do. When
And-
it's charged off,
Right.
they sell it.
So they're buying it at a much reduced rate, and then you're paying them really, so to speak, whatever the monthly payment is you've agreed to, and perhaps paying the full amount plus interest while they bought your debt at a much discounted rate.
So would it make sense that if they call and say, hi, David, Mr. Bazar, we know that you owe $5,000, you are flatly going to not talk with them, or would you likely say, could you send me a copy of that bill and who you are and what your name is, your mailing address, and I can check you out to see if you can help me? I mean, should anyone even go that route?
Well, now you're getting into federal law, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act. So once a debt goes into collection, then the collection agency has to comply with that federal law. You have a right as a consumer to demand that they provide evidence of the debt that they're alleging you haven't paid. So if you see a debt collection letter, which I see all the time because, I do a lot of bankruptcy work, all of those letters will have a disclaimer on there which says, unless you dispute this debt within 30 days, we're going to deem it a valid debt. So, but even if it's not within that 30 days, you still have that right to demand that they provide you with evidence of the debt. I had a case that went all the way to district court on this, and the creditor could not provide the evidence that the debt existed.
In that 30-day thing, I always think to myself, you can deem it whatever you want,
Yeah.
but if you're going to sue me, you still have to prove your case.
That's right.
So if you can't prove your case, the 30 days to me really is somewhat meaningless in the sense that I know the law, and they put it in there to comply with the law, says that they have to provide that information to you. But if they want to sue you, they still have to prove their case.
And while they're doing this, say it is a bona fide company that can help, even if it is a for-profit versus a nonprofit, you owe $50, they send you the bill that says, we can help this, we can help strew out the payments, it will only cost you $140. So obviously they've put in there a hefty fee. Is a company entitled to do that when you in fact knew that the bill was $50, maybe, whatever, probably more
You
than
mean
that.
the late fees and the interest and all the
And
other
their
things that-
fee
yeah.
to get involved with supposedly serving as your intermediate.
Well, the objective of a
intermediary.
debt negotiation company is to do just that, is to negotiate your debt, which, by the way, you can do on your own.
Right.
That's
So
a good
if
topic
you're
to discuss,
settling
too.
for 50 cents on a dollar, why should you pay somebody to do that? Now, some of these companies are legit, but the problem I'm finding with these companies is if they're legit if they're nonprofit. If they're for-profit, the arrangement is you have to give them so much money up front, and then you have to build an account. So let's say your settlement is about $10,000. They want $4,000.
What settlement?
If there's a settlement of all your debt, if they,
Okay, if that's what the
they come
total
up
is,
with some
okay.
kind of schedule, you have to build up that account to that certain level. So you're sending them money every month. They're keeping the first $4,000 because you signed a contract that said they're going to keep $4,000. And then when that account is built up to that level, that's when they contact your creditors and start negotiating the debt. But in the interim, you're getting calls from collection agencies, you're getting harassed, you're getting served with lawsuits, people are knocking on your door. So that's the problem with them, is they're not providing the service that they should provide.
And in fact, if you had good credit until you had this debt, now it's going to be dinged. And if you had bad credit and you're just paying this company rather than those creditors, I imagine it's making your bad credit even worse.
And it's just something that you can do on your own, or David and I have done it for people.
Right.
You can hire us and we can send out letters and negotiate the debt for you.
So, someone who comes to us in borderline file bankruptcy, don't file bankruptcy, I've got this debt, we oftentimes will tell them, don't file the bankruptcy, we can negotiate the debt. It'll show on your credit report as paid, satisfied, but not...
Through settlement.
Through settlement. But
Does that ding your credit report too?
it does to some
It
degree.
does, okay.
It does.
But you've taken all of this off your plate, and if all you needed was the fresh start because of a little bit of debt, maybe in some instances, that's a better resolution than filing the bankruptcy.
Yeah, and once a collection agency gets a notice from an attorney, or the consumer tells them that they have an attorney under the Fair Debt Collection Act, they have to cease all communications. Do they do that, companies? No, they continue to call.
Will the creditor, should the creditor stop calling, or does the debt collection
It's
agency?
The debt collection comes under the Fair Debt Collection
Okay.
Practices Act. If it's still with the creditor, it's not under that federal law. But we as lawyers, it's kind of a gray area as to whether or not we fall into that category as a debt
Yeah,
collector,
it's
because we
interesting.
also will collect some debts.
Right.
So if I send a letter trying to collect debt for a client, I always put that disclaimer at the bottom of the letter, this is an attempt to collect the debt.
The theory being, if it's something that you do on a fairly regular basis, then you fall under the act.
Yeah.
If you have one client who is owed money from one other person, and you're writing a letter on that one particular case, you may or
It's
may
different.
not really
If
have
it's
to
a
put that
personal loan,
language in.
yeah.
So, as attorneys, and you do this, provide this service, is it likely to cost the consumer a lot more or half as much as if they went to a scamming debt collection, debt negotiating
Well,
company?
if it's a scamming debt collection company, then we're certainly a much better alternative.
That's the right answer.
Well, what we do is we'll contact your creditors right away. The way we would price it probably would be not the amount of the debt, but the amount of cards that you have. So if somebody comes in and he or she has one credit card, we're not going to charge them a large fee.
Right.
You know, it's probably under $500.
And the reason
even less.
is, we're not buying the debt like these
No.
other companies might be, and then negotiating with you. We're just charging you for our time. So if it's 10 cards and just a little bit of money, it's going to take us more time than 5 cards and a lot of money.
And I can tell you, it takes a good 6 months to resolve it. And if you're current on your bill, they're not even going to respond on a debt negotiation. Some of these companies, they want you to be like 6 months or more past due, and at that point, they'll maybe take an offer of 80%. Unfortunately, the longer you've gone without paying a debt, the more likely it is to settle it for less than,
Right.
50 cents on a dollar.
I had heard that. I had also heard that after several months, maybe it goes to 50 or whatever, and then several more months, sometimes even 25 cents on, or 25%
Well,
of
it
it. I
comes
don't.
to the point where have they written it off?
Yeah.
Where have they decided this is
Yes.
uncollectible?
Once it's in the hands of a collection agency, then you have the ability, more of a likelihood to settle it for far less than 80% on the dollar.
So while you as attorneys might be approached to handle this, is it also very reasonable that a consumer, somewhat literate, or someone who's willing to take the time or has the time and can write a letter or can make a call, they can fairly successfully handle this themselves and avoid those companies entirely?
They can handle it themselves. If it's only a couple of cards, what they need to know, a couple things. When you settle a debt, most companies want your payment in a lump sum. Okay? Make sure you get it in writing. Also, the consumer needs to know that if they settle a debt for less than 100 cents on a dollar, they're going to be taxed on the difference. So
Explain that.
you want
Well, what happens, it's, if you owe $1,000 and you only pay $500, they deem that to be income to you, so they can send you a 1099.
Who will send it?
The creditor.
The credit will.
For what's
Okay.
been written
it's
off.
canceled debt.
Canceled
So the
debt.
IRS has determined that as gross income.
Now, we've talked about this a little bit before, because that's the same situation in a mortgage, but there's been some federal law that's been passed. And what's the status with that right now?
The Mortgage Relief Act, my
Right.
understanding is it's good through through the end of the year. I'm not sure if it's actually been extended, but some of the mortgage companies that are reducing the balances or probably not even getting paid because of a short sale, as long as it's your primary residence,
Right.
they won't pursue you
And
for
you-
a deficiency.
And you
Or
won't
they
get the
can.
1099.
You won't get the 1099. Now, are they compelled to follow that? I mean,
Well,
they don't
but-
have to, but if they agree to it,
Right.
what I'm finding now is, especially where second mortgages are coming in, if you're trying to close at a short sale, they might release the second mortgage and not get paid, but they want the consumer to sign like a little promissory note that says you're going to continue to pay. You're still responsible to pay the second mortgage, even in first mortgages. It just depends on the company.
Yet back on the side of the creditor who is owed money, while we've talked about the fact that some consumer may be approached by a debt collection company, I understand that at times the creditors themselves may enlist the help of another company. They turn it over.
Yeah.
Now, if a debt collection company says, "Hi, I've been hired by," are they obliged to say, "I've been hired by," so that you know that they're not a freelance company soliciting new business
absolutely.
because that's what they can do?
They have to disclose who they're working for. They also have to disclose if they've purchased the debt.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Should be in the letter.
Sometimes these companies, or they work for another company that have bought the debt. So if your original credit card was with Bank of America, for example, and you haven't paid it and it's gone for so long, Bank of America said, we're going to recover some money by selling this debt to somebody else. Now, they have to track it back when you say on that 30-day notice, I want proof I owe this money. They then have to go back to the company that bought the debt, who has to go back to Bank of America and say,
That's
supply us
exactly,
with the
yeah.
information.
Is this a smart tactic? Should I say that? Is this a smart tactic for the consumer to actually get to delay this protracted process, or the fact that somebody's after you, get another few days or weeks or whatever it takes for someone to assemble that documentation and send it out? Do you then buy yourself some time, which can be very valuable to somebody who's been in a bind?
Yeah, maybe. I would agree with that, but they have to comply with federal law, so if they do send you the information within that 30 days, then they shouldn't be trying to collect from you.
Right. So
Until they validate the debt.
It's certainly information you're entitled to. And if it takes them 25, 30, 40 days to assemble the information, I think you're going to have a quieter phone for at least a period of time.
Yeah.
Sounds like a little respite.
Right.
How about those who frequent the internet and they do it late at night and they're looking for debt relief and they find, I'm sure, pages and pages of these kinds of companies. Now they're not being solicited, they're taking the initiative. Is this also a very big buyer beware, because there are a lot of very bad
That's what I
companies
said
that look
earlier.
fakey?
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. And just word to the wise, go into the federal government or the FBI website, the Federal Trade Commission, or just Google the name of the company, and you will see if there are lawsuits against the company, or other people who have used them will have written opinions. They'll have a website, a consumer beware
And
website.
you may be able to check with the Attorney
Attorney
General's
General's
office
And
or the
they're being
Better
sued.
Business Bureau.
They're being sued, yeah.
When I started the show, I was talking about, never mind, poor you have credit, a bill to be paid. Apparently in some states, I don't know that Rhode Island and Massachusetts fall into this category, but apparently some of the collection companies have approached and have the attorneys general of different states as their partners. So now that call becomes, hello, Mrs. So-and-so, you owe thus and such amount of money, and with it comes their fee, but also, if you don't, you are going to become, you're going to be arrested, you're going to be fined,
no.
you must be paid, you must pay us
No.
to go to a credit counseling class for which the AG's office in various states collect a percentage of the money that even the debt collection company is keeping on top of their normal fees.
I haven't heard of that, but if a collection agency sends you a letter that says, in Rhode Island and Mass, if it says, if you don't pay it, we're going to arrest you, well then, first of all, they violated federal law because, number one, they have to file a lawsuit against you. They've got to get a judgment against you. You have to default on that judgment. Then they can go to court and ask for an execution or an attachment. At that point, if they don't comply or if they fail to appear in court, then they have what's called a body attachment in Rhode Island or a capias in Massachusetts. Look, we don't have debtor's prison anymore.
That's what I was going to say. We don't have debtor's prison.
But if it gets that
and
far-
you owe money, it's not a crime.
No.
So they can't tell you you're going to go to jail or they're going to have you arrested because you owe money. They can sue you, but
And
that's
they
a
have to
civil
tell you
action.
that. If you don't pay, then we have a right to sue you within so many days. But they just can't, if they're going to tell you something, they have to have followed up on it. It has to have been an action that they have taken.
And the federal law says they can't threaten you
No.
or harass you. So
Or force you into a credit counseling class?
Right.
Can they force you into that?
No.
Now, what about the bounced check?
That, well,
That's
That
that's
makes you a
different.
criminal.
Right.
That's different. Then you can, actually, I used to do this for Douglas Drug many years ago. I was in charge of collecting bounced checks, and if they didn't pay them, then I can take a whole package of all the little bounced checks, bring them to the police station.
Right, and the difference is, the statute equates that to theft.
Yeah.
So if I give you something knowing that there's no value to it, my check, and I take your goods in exchange for that, I've stolen those goods for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's why the statute is written the way it is. So if you take something from somebody and make believe you're going to pay for it and don't, and give them reason to believe it, you've committed a crime.
Now, I've seen the state of Massachusetts use a collection agency to collect on taxes, but I haven't seen them
Taxes.
do
It's different
income
from-
taxes.
Okay.
Rhode Island does on some property tax.
That's right, they do. They
Right.
use a local attorney for
Right.
that, yeah.
But that's also very different from a debt collection company now partnering with the Attorney General's office, who defends themselves by
I have
saying, we're in the business of going after serious crimes, not someone who's in arrears. But if they're doing this, you're saying that even that deserves to be challenged. If you want to say buyer beware, as you did with some of these for-profit credit companies, credit collection companies, debt collection companies, excuse me, then if someone says, hi, I'm working for the Attorney General's office, how do you have a buyer beware of that? I would think that that would be a very daunting, very intimidating opening sentence.
And first of all, prove it.
Yeah.
So
Prove it.
what would you say? You'd say, prove it, send me a letter. Say they called first, you'd say, send a copy of the letter, Jackie?
Send me a letter, send me proof of the debt. They can't just, and this is what happens with collection agencies. They'll call up and they'll make you think there's someone they're not. You know, they'll say, I'm attorney so-and-so, or I'm with so-and-so police force. They do whatever they have to do to collect that debt because most of these collectors are working on commission.
But that's illegal.
Yeah, and that's illegal as well. If they put something in a letter, it has to, you have to have been, they have to follow through on it. And, by the way, they can't contact your next-door neighbor and tell your next-door neighbor that this
owe
person
money.
has money, because now they've, again, violated the law.
Right.
What about if they threaten, if you don't, I work for the AG's office to collect this debt, if you don't pay this, you will be jailed.
Same thing.
Yeah, that,
And these are bona fide threats, or these are
You've
examples
heard
It
that
that
happens all the
that's
time,
right.
and I've had clients come in my office that have actually paid the debt because they were so afraid
Right.
that they were going to get in prison.
there have been even crazier threats and things of these debt collection agencies making to consumers that...
Oh, yeah, I was
are-
just telling you, Debbie, earlier about a client of mine who got called from a debt collector and happened to hear a baby cry in the background. She said to my client to sell the baby's crib to pay the debt.
Yeah, I mean, that's over the top.
That might be, although it's funny, it's not really funny, but it certainly might be something that would tip you off to say this is probably not a legitimate
Yeah.
company. But
Well, but we have two different things, just so we're clear. You have the debt collectors who are working for the credit company or whoever owns the debt at the time. And then the other side of that coin, which we're talking about, which are the credit counselors, the people who are theoretically trying to help the consumer
Working
who
for
owns
you.
the debt.
Yeah.
Well, if it were coming from, if there were a debt that the AG was made aware of, like a bad check, then what would actually really truthfully happen if someone just bounced the check and the AG didn't want to send a sheriff to your door because they have better
Well, that would go to
things to
local
do?
police
Yeah.
department.
Then it would go to the police department. You would expect a local police person to be knocking
No,
on your
what they
door.
used to do from the police department is send a form letter. And then usually that's enough to get their attention to pay it.
In Rhode Island, the AG is not going to
They're not
handle
gonna
that.
handle that.
If-
Yes.
If someone does have a legitimate complaint that they were given a bad check for services or goods that had been rendered, they go to the local police department and
Where
they
the check
have,
was written. Yeah.
they have a process there.
In one example of a woman who had bounced a check at Walmart, she owed $100, the thing bounced, and she gets the request that she now pay $280 and attend a credit counseling class, or she's a criminal, she'll be going to jail because the AG said so. And of course, a snide comment, someone smart, was, well, if I were really going to plan on bouncing a check, why would you want me to go to a credit counseling class? The issues are much bigger than that. But I'm not sure, I guess, after reading some of these examples, how you can teach your consumer to be aware. The minute you hear AG's office, someone's very likely to be
Call a lawyer.
concerned.
Or
a lawyer.
call the local attorney general's office. They all have a consumer protection division, and tell them, you know, I was just contacted by your office. Is there such and such a person there?
Right.
And of course, as you indicated, whenever there's a phone message, have them put it in writing, because the minute it becomes a printed document, or even email, I imagine these days, if they did that, you'd now have a
Everything in
piece
writing.
of proof.
And I'd be very surprised if you ever received that
Never.
information in writing.
No, never. You know, one time I had a client who had a debt from like 18 years ago. I don't want to say which company it was. They hired an attorney and they pursued the person, and I said to the person, the statute of limitations ran out 8 years ago
Right.
because it's 10 years in Rhode Island, 20 years in Massachusetts. So you can sue all you want, but I'm going to file a counterclaim against you, and I'm going to violate the collection law and
And abuse process.
abuse the
obviously.
process because the debt was more than 18 years old. And the other thing was, I asked the attorney to prove that he or she was licensed in Rhode Island. They weren't even licensed in Rhode
Right.
Island.
And should you ask someone for their license?
Yeah, people ask
Another
if we're
piece of
licensed.
documentation.
Yeah, and that's often a problem with law firms that are representing people, even for debt negotiators. They're not licensed to practice in the state in
Where
which
they're
you
trying to
live,
collect,
or
yeah.
where they're trying to collect.
Is there a rule of thumb about how much is a reasonable amount that you could have a debt collection company take or ask? Is there a reasonable amount? Is it 1%? Is it?
That's up to the individual.
But
Yeah.
sure. But is there any reasonable range that you would find a legitimate,
Um,
a flat fee of $100 if I had 10
pay-
credit
you mean
cards?
to pay them?
To negotiate and help you work that through with this company for
yeah.
profit.
Yeah, well, first of all, they shouldn't be using for profit.
They shouldn't
should
be.
go to Consumer Credit Counseling. There's one on Centerville Road in Warwick, and they should let them help because it's all nonprofit. And they do keep a nominal fee, which might be about 5 or 10% of your monthly payment. That's how they get paid.
The ones
Good
that
to
do it for profit are doing it to make a profit, and so they're going to charge a fairly high percentage.
Yeah.
There's plenty to talk about. Thank you for talking about the bankruptcy issue as well as the debt companies. We hope that this has been helpful to you. Obviously, these days, the economy is difficult. We understand many people have problems with debts. Hope that this has been helpful to you, put you aware of what you should and shouldn't ask for. We once again thank attorneys Jackie Grasso and David Bazar from Odette Bazar Darrow Grasso Law Firm in East Providence, and we thank you for tuning in. We hope that you will continue to ask questions, suggest topics at legalmatters@fullchanneltv.net. This has been a public outreach program from Odette Bazar Darrow Grasso Law Firm, and we hope that you will continue to stay tuned as our discussion of legal matters continues.